Well, as Jane Cannery says in this episode, Clay, every day takes figuring out all over again how to fucking live. Every day takes podcasting over and over and over again to finish Deadwood, the series. How are you? And welcome to the third season of Deadwood.
I'm good, but Wes, don't I yearn for the days when I draw across the throat made fucking resolution?
It was a simpler time. A long time ago, 2 years ago, in fact. I assume. Well, is it? Yeah, probably is. It's in the production of the show itself and in the timeline. It's probably been about 2 years total since they showed up. So it must be 1878 or late 1877 in the town of Deadwood. But here we are. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. I will say, my other favorite quote in this episode is, "Gabriel's trumpet will produce you from the ass of a pig."
Well, we might. I guess we can get that out of the way. That's. I think that's the funniest EB scene in the entire series.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
his post beating scene where he's Swearingen says, "I will profane your fucking remains, EB," and he goes, "Not my remains, Al." Very funny. We'll talk more about that. But this is it. We are up to "Tell Your God to Ready for Blood." It's the first episode of the third season, the final season of Deadwood. So after we take a short break and play the music, we're going to come back and break it down.
You're listening to a podcast that is a lie agreed upon. Join Wes and Clay as they discuss HBO's Deadwood and tell you something pretty.
This is the first episode of the third season of Deadwood. It's called Tell Your God to Ready for Blood, directed by Mark Tinker. Written by David Milch and Ted Mann. A Cornish miner. In this one, a Cornish miner is shot dead in the gem. Parp. Tulliver recovers slowly from his gut wound. Swearingen scrubs the bloodstain left by the Cornishman. Ellsworth discovers the pregnant Alma unconscious on the floor of their home. Bullock visits the gem to hear about the Cornish murder and Swearingen's elaborate ideas of Hearst's hand in the crime. Hearst and Bullock face... What's that?
Sorry, finish. Sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh, sure, sorry. Hearst and Bullock face off in Hearst's room. He asks Bullock to take a message to Alma. Bullock beats Farnham, assuming that he has told Hearst of the affair with Alma. Cochran offers Alma drugs for her pain. She does not want to reawaken that demon. Joni holds a gun to her own head. Swearingen sits with Hearst to talk of the murder and the elections. The meeting is tense. The campaign speeches are postponed. Jane spends the night inside at the Chez Ami.
You see me empty, sir. Do not pause and inquire. Simply assume and refill.
Would you rather we spoke in private?
No, fuck no. I'd rather the gentleman stay.
Captain Turner.
I'd rather the captain stay. Brings home I consort with my betters. I'll not dissemble, sir. Today's events have gave me pause.
Tell me what you mean.
Well, the beating of Farnham most recently.
That is Mr. Farnham.
Worse for wear. Not that I'd care if he weren't in your hire. Where does the sheriff get off? Taking off on one of your own.
I don't consider Bullock came here to beat Farnham. He and I had appointed to meet.
In my joint this morning, another of your workers was gut shot, Mr. Hearst.
Yes, I know.
This wasn't some hoople-head bullshit. This had the feel of a put-up job. I fear a plot against you.
I have learned to accept, Mr. Swearingen, that events sharing some effect on my interests does not make them part of a plot.
You ain't the center of the universe, in other words.
Exactly.
Don't that lead you to despair?
No, sir.
You're stronger-minded than I.
Bullock beating Farnham seems more likely some expression of a private feeling of his own.
That leaves the bloodshed in my bar. Sir, how do you count for that?
Nor are the Cornish well-loved as a race.
Not you through the Cornish. Maybe the Cornish themselves were the object of the violence.
Well, they do tend to aggregate and organize to further their financial interests.
Unions.
Have you strong feelings on that subject?
I don't give a fuck about unions, Mr. Hearst. Nor do I have any objection to the killing of the Cornish as high graders, aggregating, organizing cocksuckers. But bloodletting on my premises that I ain't approved, I take as a fucking affront. It puts me off my feed.
How do we know when you are off your feed?
You'll start to see me tearing things down. Speeches tonight are canceled. Unless the insult's cured by tomorrow, there'll be further tearing down. Fuck the fucking elections and fuck the agreement with Yankton. Let the camp return to its former repute. Unstable and unsafe for commerce.
I'm a great believer in those.
Oh, stability, sir, and commerce? I can fucking imagine. Think of all they've helped you accomplish.
Shall I perceive you, then, as dangerous to my interests?
As capable of inconvenience and of some damage and death to those that would act against my interests, I cannot fucking argue with dangerous. Different from powerful, though, which speaks to potency longer term. I not have myself called powerful in your company or the captain's.
Then I'll hope that your insult is cured, to spare the camp any danger, of however brief a duration.
I was just going to say, that first sentence that you read sounded like the opening line to like a Tom Waits song.
Oh, yeah.
The Cornishman got shot in the Gem Saloon.
Have some
Jonas Stubbs puts a gun to a head.
He's so fantastic at writing those narrative songs. They just you really feel like you're in a time and a place. Do you like Tom Waits?
I do. It took me a while to come around to him. Like the first time I listened to him, I was like,
"Is this a Muppet singing the blues?
Are you fucking serious? Like, what? is this a bit?"
Yeah.
But I did come around. I do like him quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think
he's hard to get into.
He is.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of like Coffee a bit, where it's like there's a lot of different dilutions that you can sample to kind of get into him.
What kind of coffee do you want for the day? You have to make a decision. Yeah.
But then eventually you end up just drinking it black, you know? I like it's so strange too, not to talk the whole episode about Tom Waits, but like if you go back and you listen to like his first album, it's like a Billy Joel album. It's just a guy and a piano and he's got a very normal singing voice. And then at some point he got possessed by the spirit of a homeless man from the 40s or something. Yeah. And just turned into this weird, growly story song singer. And I think it works sometimes, it doesn't others. And I think when he goes really, really off the deep end, it's a really tough listen. But there's like a sweet spot in there that I really like. Yeah.
He goes, he's so all over the place that it's hard to just isolate a particular album, even though I guess Bone Machine would be a good place to start with them just because it seems the most straight ahead of everything. But like the Ramones covered a song off that one.
Oh, really?
Going Out West is a great song.
I really liked Blue Valentines. Yeah. Because that's where he's doing the growly thing, but he's still singing sort of traditional songs, like kind of blues ballads and stuff. Yeah. I really like that stuff.
Back to this one, which I've already figured out the title. Tell your gods ready for blood. So I guess there's a lot of boring, not a lot, but I'll try to go through this quickly, and it's off the top of my head because I don't have the Bible in front of me because I didn't have time to make notes. What?
You don't have the good book is just tucked under your leg.
It is. I should. I'm always clutching the Deadwood Bible like Cy does in this one until someone leaves the room or stops listening to the podcast, and then I just sigh and put it down. So basically, the behind the scenes stuff for this one is that the turnover in production staff from season 2 to season 3 is pretty far-reaching, really. So there was not a lot of turnover from season 1 to season 2. It was a lot of the same people. It's a small group. But in season 3, we lost Jody Worth and Liz Sarnoff left. Liz Sarnoff went on to do Lost, interestingly. Oh. And Jody Worth was sort of pushed out by Milch, interestingly, too. Sort of, it sounds from the Bible like just sort of to kickstart his own career as a showrunner, which eventually he did by sort of he did pitching to CBS and things like that and got shows
like,
produced.
Do you ever see that documentary that was on Netflix for a while called like 6 Feet from Stardom, which is all about backup singers and like it's backup singers and like studio musicians and stuff. Yep. And someone was talking about when they were in, I think it was the guy from Fuel or Filter, one of those bands. Okay. And he's like, yeah, I used to play in 9 Inch Nails, and Trent Reznor basically kind of treated us like shit and didn't pay us very well. Mm-hmm. And his excuse was, you shouldn't want to stay in this band.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because you should want the experience, and then you should go do your own thing, which makes sense in your head when you're thinking it, but to the person you're saying it to, sounds pretty shitty.
It's a good excuse that no one can really poke a hole into if it works out for the other person.
Yeah, great documentary. Highly recommend it.
That's basically what Milch did with Worth, who had been sort of a protege for a long time. And he's fine at this point, so things haven't changed. But he's not around in season 3. He was apparently there was a agreement between him and Steve Bocho, however you pronounce it, who's the other NYPD Blue producer.
Oh, Bochco,
sorry. Yeah. There was Milch wasn't allowed to poach NYPD Blue writers to Deadwood. It was just like an agreement that they had when Milch left that show. But he did pick up Mark Tinker, who directed this episode, because Tinker left eventually, and there was a little bit of a break, and they were able to get him. And so he brought in some new writers in season 3 and some experienced writers, and a lot of people left at the same time. So it was a big turnover. I don't know if you felt it. I felt that this episode looks different than the first 2 seasons. Yeah.
I actually noticed it right away from like the first shot where they do that like crane move.
The one with Hearst on the floor?
No, it's a shot of the town. It's an exterior shot of the town.
Oh, right. Yeah, kind of a CG background or something.
I noticed it was like CGI, and I was like, oh, that's weird. They've never done that before. So like right away, I felt like there was something different going on.
Yeah, I feel that it's shot more. Tinker directed it. I guess the NYPD Blue kind of makes sense. It felt like it was shot more like the way that conversational network shows are shot in some ways. Like there was a lot more of a lot less long camera shots and more just close-ups of the 2 characters who are having a conversation with each other. It didn't feel, it felt different from the first 2 seasons. It's hard to put a finger on it, but there was something almost dreamlike about it. Like there was a lot of like short lens work. Like the backgrounds are blurry in a way that I'm not used to on Deadwood. It feels like they didn't do that as much outside of the pilot, which Walter Hill directed. But this one, it felt like they definitely went in a different direction, at least in how they shot the thing.
Yeah, I did notice there were quite a lot of close-ups. I did think it worked really well in the scene with Hearst and Bullock, though, because they just keep cutting back to this extreme close-up on Bullock as like you can see the cartoon tea kettle noise starts going off and like the steam starts coming out of his collar.
Much anticipated, Mr. Bullock. Some good, solid talk between us. Will you drink?
No. Thanks.
I believe I won't either. I'm told that you operate a hardware concern.
I partnered with Solstar.
Candidate for mayor. As you are for sheriff. And an officer of the Deadwood Bank.
Saul's chief officer. Yes.
And you are an officer, too.
Yes.
The bank capitalized, as I understand, by Mrs. Alma Garrett Ellsworth, formerly quartered in this hotel and who has struck so rich in these hills.
Way back second to you.
Extraordinary, the story of that woman's adventures. Do you suppose that its future chapters might be written elsewhere than the hills?
What are your intentions?
As to Mrs. Ellsworth's holdings, I would shape those to the lady's preferences and be pleased and grateful if you told her. Do you need a handkerchief, Mr. Bullock?
No.
Unfortunate incident this morning at Swearingen's saloon. Do you know about it?
No.
One of my workmen was killed in a drunken shootout. How will you deal with that, Sheriff?
Depends. What it was about, who makes complaints.
My worker was Cornish. They are a clannish people. I suppose another Cornish might complain.
I'd need to hear what he said then.
He may also indict the Sunrise. For men of that sort, events such as these are as natural
Anyways,
May we speak of your ambitions?
another time.
I would want to support them, you see. I would want to back you, to thank you for taking her my message.
I never said I'd take her your message.
Are you saying now that you won't?
You stay out of our fucking affairs.
Affairs of that sort are not my interest, Mr. Bullock. My only passion is the color.
Because now that you've reminded me of that, like the shot of Bullock, there's something about the angle, right? There's something strange about the angle that was chosen, and it's not strange, but it's very different from the way that Deadwood was previously shot by the previous directors. So
It's a very stylized angle where it's like it's not straight on. It's like kind of tilted. The camera's kind of up and tilted down a little bit.
Yep.
You know, and so you're getting like this extreme close up of his face at this kind of odd angle, and you still get like the mirror in the background.
Yes,
and it's a more kind of impressionistic shot, I think, than the show usually does.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know if that's the right word, but
no, it's Would it be impressionistic or like it's not surreal, but there's something dreamlike about it, I guess. Like
sure.
it feels out of reality. But we'll see if it sticks or if it's just really kind of a Mark Tinker thing that's been added to it. But Ted Mann is back. Some of the other writer, Regina Corrado, has returned in this one as a writer. So it's still a small group of writers with Milch laying on his back on the floor, verbally writing out the scripts as everyone stands around and waits for the pages to be done.
I skimmed that thing that Kyle put up in the Discord, and that I wasn't sure if I was understanding it correctly, but apparently I was, and that just sounds like brutal for everybody involved.
Yeah, it was apparently his writing style, which is that so many of the characters have back problems because Milch has back problems, which I can relate to, but his writing for the day would be he would lay on the floor and have like his assistant with the computer, and he would and they would project the script up onto the wall, and he would verbally write the script, and then the assistant would type it in and make changes and things like that.
I'm very impressed by that because any time that I have tried to like leave myself a voice memo to write something like in the way that one might write it, I can never do it.
Yeah.
It just never comes out the same way. For some reason, whatever the pathway is from my brain to my hands and my brain to my mouth is completely different.
Yeah. But I think for Deadwood, at least, it kind of makes sense because the way that the dialogue is so stylized, I do feel that he would have to say it out loud to see how it sounds.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
So it makes sense that it would be written that way. I don't really have a problem with his writing. Apparently, the people that got annoyed by his writing process thought it was a little bit like performative. Like people would kind of watch him do this, and he felt, and they thought that Milch was kind of like not showing off, but being just kind of like an arrogant prick about it, just being like, look what I can do. So
yeah, it does feel very
self-aggrandizing, I guess would be the word.
Yeah, it feels like something like a Roman emperor would do.
Yeah, right.
Like, are there people feeding him grapes and like fanning him down?
Yeah, so it's been something he's been doing the entire series and continues to do it here.
That's how Baron Harkonnen writes.
The grapes would be a nice touch. It's hot wherever they are. So that's pretty much it for the behind the scenes stuff. There'll be more as the season continues, and we have different things to talk about. But it's really just a lot of turnover coming into this season. I again will state that I remember this being one of my favorite seasons. I can't remember accurately if I thought 1 or 3 was better, but my delight with George Hearst always makes me think of season 3. And so we'll see if that lives up to anything. And you, of course, have not seen any of season 3, so this is all going to be new for you.
Right. Yeah. I watching this one, I definitely thought I had seen none of this.
Okay. Yeah. It's all brand new. So why don't you start us off? What did you think of Tell Your God to Ready for Blood?
I don't know. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, it was kind of boring. We could have skipped it, so we'll just come back next week. Did you? Well, I guess my first question would be: as someone unfamiliar with it, were you surprised or did you notice that? First of all, it was the longest previously on Deadwood. I think if you combined all the previously with Deadwoods, it would have equaled the length of this one. But did you feel that a lot of the characters were not reset, but like that the episode almost re-stressed a lot of character traits that have been brewing in characters since the very beginning of the series. I'm thinking in particular, like Bullock's inability to control himself is a big part of this one. Joni being suicidal is another one that's a part of it. I was kind of surprised that it didn't feel like the characters were going back or regressing, but I was a little bit surprised at how this one took advantage of character traits that I almost would have expected that they would get better at by this point. Like you think that their characters would have learned something, but no, this episode relies pretty heavily on existing characterization to make things work, make the wheels spin.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Seth went off the way that he did, given the journey he went on through the second season. It did seem a little bit surprising that he would react so strongly to something he didn't have all the information about.
Yeah.
But I will say the one that did stand out to me immediately was Al, because that first scene with Al, when he comes down after the guy gets shot and he's chewing out Jewel and everything, I was like, oh, this feels like first season Al. Mm-hmm. The way that he's trying to run the game on the house, on Saul, and just the way that he's being really shitty to Jewel, and it felt a lot more. It almost felt like they came back after season 2 and were like, we've softened Al too much. We need to give him that edge that he had in the first season.
I would agree. I guess that the thing here is that he's stressed at this point, right? Which is like causing his regression. I don't disagree that he does come across as kind of the more brute force, sort of evil character, or at least the character who's willing to do all the dark stuff that he was in season 1. It is a. They don't finish the episode that way. Because his final scene is him talking to Bullock at the very end about like what the threat of Hearst means to everybody, and that how he's upset if that would be the way that things ended for the town. Swearingen is. So I think he's upset and frustrated and sort of emotional, and when he's scrubbing the blood stain, it's obviously all coming out. He's very frustrated with Johnny and sort of has a short temper and everything like that. But it does feel like he is back in his old season 1 shoes. I thought that to move to the Bullock thing, was it the right decision to have Bullock talk with Swearingen before he met with Hearst? Or is Bullock's anger... I was wondering if Bullock's anger seems to stick out more because Swearingen had overtly told him what Hearst was going to do in that scene. And I was thinking that wouldn't Bullock's reaction make more sense if he was unaware of what Hearst was doing and he just sort of naturally got carried away through his conversation with Hearst and Swearingen had not primed the pump for him? Because I was struck a little bit by Bullock getting so mad so quickly. I was like, dude, Al just told you to get ready for this. Like, why are you so angry? Where if he was caught unaware of it, I think it would have worked better for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's going into that meeting specifically knowing that Hearst is trying to find a way to press his buttons and like get one over on him.
Yeah.
And so I guess you could, I agree. I think the fact that Seth knew that going in and still reacted that way is not super consistent.
Or just kind of, I guess maybe not consistent, but like it shows badly on Bullock, I guess.
Yes.
It's like and maybe that's kind of the point. Like that is sort of the point, but I still feel after the 2 seasons, he should be a little bit better at controlling his temper for these things.
Yeah, especially if he knows that someone's
doing it intentionally to him.
Yeah. I think the argument might be that he was prepared for one thing and got hit with something he wasn't prepared for, and so he reacted accordingly.
Yep. Although
but
he's pissed off even before that happens. Like the first thing that Hearst says to him has him scratching his nose and looking furious.
He gets pissed off the same way my dog gets pissed off. Where if you say like, you want to go for a walk, and you don't do it right away, he starts like walking around going like Like sneezing.
You need a tissue, sir. I think another, like, I'll finish with this final thought and you can let me know what you thought. But I continue to think that Oliphant is definitely not the strongest actor in the entourage, right? And I think that the scene with Hearst is a good example of what Timothy Oliphant does not do particularly well. And like the casting that I think that they had in mind for Bullock does not exactly line up with what Oliphant is good at in a lot of ways. Like his switch to anger comes across as, I think, a little bit too petulant, which maybe in an ideal casting of Deadwood's Bullock, he would be more. It would look less like he was sort of a spoiled brat, and it would just be more of like an outburst that would get him in trouble. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's something about the performance that just doesn't sit right. Like he acts a little bit too obviously annoyed, I guess, and the characters can see through it. And it doesn't show Hearst as like a genius manipulator, really, because he just says something. He's like, oh, this guy's clearly unstable, and I can push him in one direction.
Yeah, they try to do it's funny because I think what he's trying to do in this episode, he has done better in the previous season. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's because they've given him more stuff to chew on then or what, but like I think about how he reacted to the death of what's the son's name?
William Bullock.
William. How soon we forget.
Yeah, I know, memorable.
I think he did a really nice job of playing that sort of bottled up emotion after in the scenes that followed William's death, like the scene where he's carrying the coffin and Al is trying to talk to him, and like, whereas in this one he's just tasked with like literally doing that. I'm gonna stand here and wait till I explode kind of thing, and I just don't. It does kind of come off as a little bit over the top the way that he does, because I don't know how else you're supposed to do it, but like it does feel like that cartoon thing where it's like you're waiting for his head to go off like a tea kettle.
Yeah. I guess in my ideal performance, it would be a little bit like, it must have been a direction choice sort of even written to the script, but like the scratching of his nose, seems like too obvious of a tell. It's like the rounders bit of the tell is like you dunk your Oreo or something. It's like, I don't think that this guy would actually have such a dramatic tell as this, but my ideal casting would really just have, I couldn't come up with an actor off the top of my head, but it's like he's more restrained in some ways, but like it still comes through. He's not so obviously weak, or at least at this point he shouldn't be, because I didn't really have the same problem back in season 1 where Swearingen was trying to talk to them about renting the lot that they wanted to get, because then it felt like it's kind of like a learning thing for Bullock, and like he's coming in, he's the lawman from out of town, and this guy's going to try to swindle him, and Bullock doesn't want to stand for that. But it felt like there was a lesson learned there, where here it's all he's forgotten the lesson, and Hearst just gets the better of him right from the get-go. Yeah,
and I overall I don't know if I necessarily hate the choice, but I do agree that he is probably the least. He's having the toughest time, acting wise with everybody, because everybody else is so. It's such a tough role because everybody else has like pretty big swaths they can cut, and he has to keep it so tight. And Timothy Oliphant always keeps it tight, but it is a tough role to play amongst all of these big, loquacious characters.
They mentioned it in the Bible, and it's maybe not. They're actors, so they're supposed to get around it. But Oliphant, as a normal person, has a very laid back California attitude about him, like the way that he is, and so it's like it's a real acting choice for him to be Bullock. It doesn't seem like he naturally fits it. And, great actors would get around that, I suppose, but it's not really a slight on him. It's just he's as a person, he's not really designed for what Bullock is supposed to be. It doesn't seem.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about that scene we're talking about in particular is I feel that Major Dad definitely doesn't have that problem. Like I feel like in that scene, acting wise and just in the meat of the scene, Hearst eats his lunch basically.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like the guy who plays Hearst is really good.
Gerald McRaney.
And he can kind of get across this air of controlled power very well.
Yep.
Where he can really be intimidating without doing too much. And I just don't know if Oliphant really has the chops at this point to match that.
No, and it's sort of, you know, not to interrupt, but it thematically matches what happens later when Swearingen talks to Hearst, right? Like Bullock has no chance against Hearst and can't manage it and kind of blows everything up, which leads to Swearingen having to talk to Hearst later on. Mm-hmm. And that scene's fantastic because it's great. Those two of them, McRaney as Hearst is outstanding, and obviously McShane as Swearingen is outstanding. But it's like both of those characters in that scene react in ways that I would expect them to, and they're both. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that like the Bullock thing is intentionally supposed to get to that point, but it feels a little bit sloppy to me how Bullock ends up fucking things up so badly, so quickly. You know, Amy had the comment that she's like, wow, season 3 really just it gets going in a way that season 2 didn't get going. And I felt that if this was season 2, Bullock would have had a couple of episodes of like the build up to this meeting or something, and he would have been getting more and more annoyed by it.
Let's not forget that season 2 starts with Al and
That's true.
Seth almost killing each other in the streets.
This fight. That's true, but it doesn't. There's a lot of. That's actually not even really all that relevant to like the plot itself, because all that does is remove Swearingen.
Season 1.
Yeah, and it's a hangover from season 1. It just removes Swearingen from the plot itself. But I agreed with it. I think that like it kicks off very quickly in this one, and I think that Bullock's decisions are part of that quickness to get things moving.
Yeah, I'll reserve judgment on it overall until I see how things play out more. But I mean, I don't hate them getting going a little quicker, because I do think that season 2 is a lot more languid in its pace, for better or worse.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing that they're doing in season 2 requires much more rope.
Yep.
Whereas here, I mean, you know, Hearst is here. May as well get down to it, you know?
Yeah, and I think a good way to move off of that is that Hearst is an evolution of Walcott, interestingly, to me. Like, they're not very different characters from each other. It's just that Hearst is more fully developed than Walcott is. There's like an insecurity in Walcott that prevents him from being as devastating as Hearst can be.
When he said, when Walcott said all he cares about is the color, he was talking about getting peed on.
That's some R. Kelly vibes in 1876, where the only passion that George Hearst has is for the color. Just to go back to that scene, you can take it any way you want. Does Hearst know what he's doing when he's talking to Bullock? Or is he just lucky?
In terms of what?
Or is he just lucky in terms of using the right word of affairs when he's talking to him?
Oh, and in terms of does Hearst
know what all
actually know?
Did he know before that conversation what was going on with Bullock and Alma?
I don't know. He seems like someone who would, but the way that he kind of plays the rest of the episode kind of makes me think that he doesn't.
Yeah,
because he seems a little bit baffled by it.
Yeah, he's I think he's set up as, because they've implied this ability that he has to sniff out gold, right? Mm-hmm. Like they've implied that Hearst is a person who just kind of intuits things and is able to see things for what they are. Like the purity of Hearst's drive is what enables him to see other things very clearly, is the way that I always take it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's sort of a combination. It's sort of a I probably would say that Hearst doesn't know what's going on until the minute that Bullock walks into that room, kind of, and then Hearst knows something immediately at that point. He does this weird thing of he mentions Alma's entire full name to Bullock, and sort of gauges his reaction. He uses the words affairs. He asks, like, it's crossing this line of being personal, where he's like, do you think that Alma would basically leave the town and so that I could act here unencumbered, which comes across as kind of a way of like semi-insulting to Bullock, like knowing the relationship and whether or not she would leave and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure, but as you say, Hearst spends the rest of the episode kind of figuring out, and the rest of the characters try to figure out if it was just Bullock spoiled himself or if E.B. Farnham had told Hearst something, which is not the case.
But then there's the end of that where he has to ask Bullock why he's both crying and has an erection at the same time.
There's only enough for one. There's only enough blood flow. Outside of that, it results in Bullock just beating the shit out of Farnham, which is a lot of fun, leading to the scene that we were talking about before, where Farnham is laying on the bed, kicked to shit, and he has to talk to Al and convince Al that he didn't tell anybody.
I did really like the metaphor that E.B. wove about Bullock going up to talk to Hearst. The whole gold metaphor about striking into his vein and splitting it. That was good.
Yeah. As they're like leering from down on the steps. Yep. So Farnham convinces Swearingen that he did not tell Hearst, but then that causes Al to have to go and talk to Hearst himself and threaten Hearst in their scene together with, if things don't go well, Al has no problem complicating things and sort of bringing Deadwood back to the way that it was, which is the season 1 Deadwood, which was lawless and commerce couldn't actually function there because there is no law and there's nothing to protect, and that's something that Hearst is not interested in. So Hearst's goal is not really to tear everything down and destroy everything. It's more to just take control of everything that's been built up, which will enable him to get the mines running. Yeah,
I do. I did really like that from Al, where his response was basically like, "Listen, I have no qualms about making this place a total hellhole again. In fact, I'm looking forward to doing it."
It's how will we know when you're off your feed, Al? Yeah, it's Hearst lets Al walk away at that very end, but they are plotting something with those the assassins who killed the Cornish.
Are the assassins Irish?
No, just from their accents, you're talking.
I thought I heard an Irish accent, but I wasn't sure.
Get the fuck out!
He come at me with his foreign gibberish.
Get the fuck out while I let you get the fuck out. You two, you get out that way. Leave him be or you'll be riding the goddamn sled with him. Get out! Parp. Either you cocksuckers want to talk funny at me.
Good eye, sir.
I'm unclear, I guess. The Cornish are Irish, right? Or the Cornish something? No, the Cornish would be...
Cornish is... I think Cornish
Dutch?
is...
Where are the Cornish from?
Find out.
Yeah, Cornish.
It's where they make the game hens.
Ethnic group in the UK.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was a Britannic Celtic language family.
Yes. So they're not Irish, but they're British. So, yeah. I don't know if...
associated with Cornwall and a recognized national minority in the United Kingdom.
Yeah. So I don't know if the assassins were Irish. They do have sort of a accent to them, but one guy definitely didn't look Irish, so maybe it's just him.
All I know about the Cornish... My pause implies I'm going to get racist, but I'm not. All I know about the Cornish...
They like to unionize. I know that much.
All I know about the Cornish is that it was the King of Cornwall whose wife Uther Pendragon stole, which led to his untimely death and Merlin taking his firstborn son, whose name was Arthur.
Yeah.
So there's your history lesson for you for the
Uther
day.
Pendragon.
You know what I learned?
Go ahead.
I'm only bringing this up because the King Arthur thing made me think about how so much of that is actually like there's like a French element to it that got added and all this kind of stuff. You know what I learned recently that kind of blew my mind? Greco-Roman wrestling was invented in France as recently as the 1800s. The only reason it's called Greco-Roman is because they wanted to get it into the Olympic Games.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Isn't that why? Like I just assumed it's like, oh, it's the they wrestled. Apparently the wrestling they did way back when
was
completely
basically just
different.
fighting. Yeah, just no rules.
Everything is a lie.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you always have to appeal to the egos of the Greeks and the Romans when you try to bring something into the Olympics, which I guess is why snowboarding
Like
is
kilts?
a hard time.
The modern understanding of like wearing a kilt and your what is it, your family colors, that's also fairly recent. That's like an 1800s thing as well.
Is that really?
I think there's like a connection that goes back, but like the popularization of it,
like everyone wearing them or something.
Yeah,
like
that was a fashion thing. It was basically like a hipster fashion thing in the 1800s.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well, that's not what Mel Gibson's Braveheart tells me, Clay, so I don't know if that's actually true.
Have you ever seen that statue, the Braveheart statue? That's
of
in
Mel
Scotland?
Gibson?
Yeah, the one not the like the official William Wallace statue, but like it's a Braveheart statue.
No, it's in Scotland.
It's awful. Try and find it for you.
I'm surprised that the Scottish would allow that. Seems like a New Zealand thing to do. Back to this. And I guess other characters are like Jane is drinking again in this one is a prominent story, which feels like it's a little bit of a redundancy or like they're going back on something. This is the picture of. Oh, he's like screaming.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Freedom. But yeah, I thought a lot of the characters felt like they were reverting or something like that, but it felt like I was surprised by the lack of advancements in their story, even though I think this is probably the biggest jump we've had in Deadwood's timeline between this episode and the last episode of the second season. I think it's been a couple months potentially that has separated it. So not sure.
I was surprised at. I guess I wasn't really surprised, but this show always surprises me in how much they let time actually pass between seasons.
Yeah.
So having the election starting and Saul running for mayor was surprising, and having the bank up and running to the point where they were giving out loans for houses and stuff or whatever that was was surprising.
Why does Adams have such a nice house? How did he land that?
Yeah. I don't know.
What if we stretched out the payments?
Cannot fucking make it. The fuck was in my head to sign that note?
Take it easy.
Take it easy, Mr. Adams.
Oh, take it off me, can't you? Ain't there some way to take it off? Oh, God.
I'm in crisis too. Needing awfully to piss.
Although
isn't it relatable though? Maybe it's a Big Short situation where he ended up getting a loan that he couldn't pay back and bought a house that was too big and the market crashed. Because as far as I know, in Deadwood, there's like a house, maybe two.
Adams is next to the whorehouse, like boarding house with that Shaughnessy guy, who's one of my favorite characters. The sort of.
Interesting new character.
Yeah, interesting new character who runs his like boarding facility there. But yeah, Adams, one of the things we haven't talked about and that I was really reminded of in this one is, and the show hasn't even commented on it, Adams is frequently asked by Al or other people to pretend to be like have different motivations than what he does. So he basically has to act. And I've always kind of noticed that he's not particularly good at it, but the show never calls it out on him, which is funny. Like there's in the second season when he had to pretend when he was talking to Jerry and things like that, I kept expecting a cutaway to Al who just like turns his head and goes like, Jesus Christ, like tone it down. This is like, you're not selling it. But no one No one seems to think he's actually overacting, which I think is funny.
Well, they do in this episode.
Yes.
When Trixie
Trixie
follows
picks up
him
on
out.
it. Yep.
Yeah. I liked Saul's reaction, which was just complete befuddlement as to whatever was going on.
He just stands behind the desk as like people leave the scene and they come back 5 minutes later and he's still just standing there befuddled as to what is going on. Mm-hmm. Trixie and him have a fun, very funny relationship. I like when Trixie yells at Saul. It's funny.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Any thoughts about this one outside of that? I asked you your sort of opening thoughts, but what did you think in general?
I thought it was good. I continue to be I mean, at this point I'm not surprised by it, but I guess the endings of these episodes always catch me off guard because they all just sort of like meander their way to the credits in a way that is different from, I feel like, most shows. And they do have, so I think it's just that there's so many, what am I trying to say? It doesn't really feel like a season premiere type episode because they just click right back into gear with like 5 or 6 different stories at the same time.
Right.
And so it just kind of feels like you're back in the world. Things are going on as they're going on. And from like a TV standpoint, it doesn't feel like it's this big return to the show or anything like that, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It's just different.
Yeah. Watching them all in a row, it makes it feel like there is no real seasons between the two.
Right. That's the thing. It's like coming back to this, I felt like the last season didn't even end. It was just things were just kept going. You know?
Still ongoing.
And it's strange too from a viewer standpoint because this show doesn't really give you a lot of cues as to what you should get excited about or storylines that you should get into. They just kind of happen. And so when you've got that final scene with Al and Seth, it's a good scene, and what it's establishing is for the season is really interesting, and that Hearst is probably gonna be coming after Al. But it's done in such a way that it's just kind of lays it out there and just kind of you pick it up or you don't.
Right.
So it just continues to be structurally a very interesting show.
Pain in the balls, Hearst. Running his holdings like a despot, I grant, has a fucking logic. It's the way I fucking run mine. It's the way I'd run my home if I fucking had one. But there's no practical need for him to run the fucking cap. That's out of scale. It's out of proportion. And it's a warped, unnatural impulse. This fucking cocksucker. Sorry.
Shall I go back down with you?
Won't be just now. He'll be wanting to marshal his cutthroats.
My takeaway from the larger point of this one is that there was, and I don't know if it's because of where we are in the 3rd season or if it's a product of the show itself. There are certain storylines that are like, I can easily kind of sort storylines at this point to me, like whether or not I like them or not, really. And I'm starting to see the storylines that I'm surprised that they're sticking with and giving so much time to, because I don't know if there's a lot there anymore that they can get into. I think like the Jane and Joni storyline kind of fits that for me. Like,
yeah.
I kind of feel like they're repeating themselves a little bit, and it's not the most interesting storyline to me, really. Like I understand the heart of the conflict between them, and that they are kind of protecting each other, and they complete each other in a way that no one else in their orbit can. Like Joni goes back to Cy a little bit in this one, and she's searching for a reason to live, and so she goes back to the Bella Union, but she knows that isn't her calling, and that's like not the best thing for her, so that's when she contemplates suicide. And then she goes back, and then she has her connection with Jane, which is that like as they are united, they kind of like fix each other from drinking and this desperation or the suicidalness or whatever. And that's all well and good. It just doesn't feel like their scenes don't feel like they have a point to move them forward into anything, unfortunately. And I contrast it with I'm super invested in just like the Hearst versus the town stuff at
Sure,
this point, you know, and it's like that's the stuff that I feel like all the scenes really crackle, and there's like an interesting and like what are they going to do at this point, and there's this threat of violence in the background, even if there's nothing overtly happening. So I feel like there are some scenes that were character arcs that I'm a little bit surprised are still in the show at this point, and that they're continuing with them in the third season.
Yeah, I feel like if we're taking early bets on which one of the storylines is going to get the Isringhausen Award, I feel like Joni's storyline is going to be the one, because it just the fact that I actually completely forgot that she had previously been suicidal, and now that you've told me that, it makes me feel even more so like they don't really know what to do with her.
Yeah.
And like it's her story at the moment is that she doesn't know what to do with herself, but I don't have a ton of confidence that that's not just the writers and Milch echoing their own feelings about her,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. It's weird that her storyline crossed seasons to me. You know, like it feels like the kind of thing that they're maybe they just didn't have time, but it feels like there's the kind of thing where there's something happens at the end of the second season that sets her on a new path that they can go with her. But to come back to it just felt redundant again. It just felt like, it's like, oh, right, we're still here with Joni, unfortunately. And Jane is kind of the same way, where it's like she's back drinking, and you're like, you know, a lesser show, maybe, and it's not particularly Deadwoodian, but it's because I think that Milch and the writers like the characters to exist as the way that they've drawn them. So moving them in a particular way away from that is not exactly what the show is interested in. But at the same time, the characters can only circle the drain so many times before you start going like, why? Like, why won't they do something else?
Yeah, when Jane showed up and she was getting trashed again, part of me was disappointed, because I did feel like that they had regressed her. But with her specifically, I didn't mind it that much, because I find that to be a fairly realistic portrayal of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like that's not the kind of thing that they do on TV that often, where usually if it's an alcoholic who kicks, they have scenes in later seasons where they're horribly tempted, or they go on a binge or something, and it's all big and dramatic. Whereas this one, it's like, no, she said she was going to stop drinking and she didn't.
Right.
You know, she did for 2 weeks, and then she didn't.
Yep.
Which is really more accurate to the way that stuff usually plays out.
Evening, Jane.
Mrs. Bullock asks me to author with her to give the children an account of my scouting for Custer.
I think I'd like to hear that story myself.
Custer was a cunt. The end. Oh, a piss puddle. Must not have seen that when seating myself.
Why are you drinking so much?
I drink what I'm able. If there comes to much, that's the day's affair in the liquors. You returning to the Belly Union?
Not tonight.
As residence and workplace is my meaning.
Those girls need looking out for.
And who will look out for you? Against that gut-stabbed cocksucker weaving schemes from his coming to Jesus.
I don't know.
Why is everybody fucking whispering all of a sudden?
I said I don't know.
And they are pairing her with Mose, who has been redeemed in a lot of ways, you know. So it's like she's getting frustrated by the fact that this guy has proven, like, made it very obvious that it is possible to change and to do better with yourself.
Yeah, and it does disappoint me that Joni that they haven't figured out what to do with her. And as far as Jane goes, I mean, who hasn't forgotten to look down and accidentally sat and pissed that may or may not be their own? But like it was strange to me. So if I understand what's going on, the Chez Amis is now the school, right?
Yes, they rent it use it as a school place. Yep.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they didn't just like that. Just wasn't the new paradigm for her, and Jane is dealing with that, and that they did have her going back to Cy. Like, I get it to a certain extent that Cy got stabbed, but whatever. But it's like I didn't find the her and Cy stuff particularly engaging, because I did feel like this was just sort of retreading stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see if they find something for her to do, or if she just keeps running in place.
Yeah.
I am sad to see that apparently between seasons, Lila became a heroin addict, which I don't know if that's another hand of the God Rider on the scale because they didn't like her or something. But I was very surprised to see that. I thought the girl who was in charge was her, because they look kind of similar.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And then she turns to Lila, who's just all strung out in the corner. I was like, what?
Yep. It's a hard life, Clay. Is the life of a whore. But it's the Cy and Joni thing is like, I think it's intentionally done as frustrating because she's not going to go back to him, right? But she's still looking for what she can do. But it's it's a plot beat or whatever you want to call it, or a storyline that is not going to go one way, but they still kind of have to do it to show how desperate she is and how she's at the low point in her life at this point where she's even considering going back and thinking that that's something that she wants to do. But it's probably all just set up, and we'll see exactly what happens in the next couple episodes.
Yeah, I'm I was thinking one way you could go is Joni now has to balance her pull back to Cy with her pull to the school, to a more straight life. But that's just Trixie again, and the Trixie angle is a lot more interesting than it would have been with Joni. So
yeah, I think I mentioned before, Joni's not one of my favorite characters really in the show. I think it's just a combination of she's not super exciting as a character, and the performance doesn't really do anything for me.
I really like her. I think the actress is good. I like her. But I think there was a certain point in season 2 where that seemed like they were going to do something interesting with her, and then they ended up not. And that I mean, what happens obviously is Wellcott kills everybody, but it is. I was hoping they were going to find something more for her to do, instead of just sort of sit around and be sad for herself for most of the season.
Yeah. The other plots are Saul and Trixie, who are trying to get a place, and they're trying to get a place. If we haven't mentioned, it's because Saul is running for mayor, so Swearingen wants him to win, and he can't have the mayor be just fucking whores in his hardware store. So he's gonna give him Adams's house, and then I can't tell if he's joking or not, but like cut a hole in the wall so that Trixie can get into the house. It's unclear if that's a joke or if that's something that's actually going to happen. But that's all laying the foundation for the elections that are the backbone of what they want to do, because the elections will provide a little bit of protection against Hearst, I suppose. And Hearst is obviously interested in getting the elections and having his people win the elections that come up.
I'm wondering if Saul doesn't just ask her to marry him, because that's kind of how I thought that scene was going. Mm-hmm. When she gets so amped up about the situation and her just
when I come through the wall and tend to your Johnson.
Yeah, I thought like the especially the way he was getting very flustered by it. I thought it was going to end with him proposing marriage to her or something.
Yeah,
because I mean I feel like I think that's part of what is so frustrating to Trixie, is that she's still doing all, like, she's still sneaking around in the shadows and X, Y, and Z, and so I'm wondering if that's on the table.
The risk business on Adam's house loan. Adam's being nothing but his fucking stalking horse from the Gambit's fucking beginning. You signed to take those over. We'll move in your 12 possessions. You'll be free to come and go by your own front fucking door. And as you lay in your Betty by, I'll pop from the wall like Grandma Groundhog in a storybook and attend to your Johnson, as he'd not see you jeopardize your mayor's campaign whore fucking in your place of business. And I'll have installed in room 3 fucking C or the like of Shaughnessy's adjacent shitbox that he's paid Shaughnessy to cut a hole through to ease my fucking you.
Swearingen has.
Who the fuck was I just talking to?
I don't know. You said you'd just gone to piss.
Sorry, just moving. Charlie Utter is back here. He has this scene with Bullock, where Bullock puts himself in the cage and says he doesn't want to be the, because a lot of the character motivations for the guys is that they don't want to be running for office, but they kind of have to, and none of them want to. So that's the tension that's going on there, which ties into the Hearst and the Bullock storyline and the Saul and Trixie storyline and things like that. But Charlie comes back and tries to pep up Seth Bullock the best that he can.
I should have my girlfriend watch this season because I think she would identify with all those plot threads, because she was recently made a manager at her job and she really doesn't want to be a manager. And so I'm like, look at all these people who don't want to do the things that they have to do.
That's right. It's time to suck up the responsibility.
Then she'd probably be like, yeah, how about I just kick the shit out of you instead, because it seems to work for Seth Bullock.
How can you tell when you're off your feed, Clay? Alma. Oh, and I guess another one is Alma is back on laudanum at this point. So, it's...
I'm hoping that doesn't continue, because I'm not interested in that.
Yeah. Her storyline is that obviously, for just the listeners, that her pregnancy is difficult at this point, so she is bedridden. Is in between bossing around Ellsworth.
Is the actress really pregnant or something? Because that really feels like something they would do if she was really pregnant, where it's like, all right, we'll just put you in a bed.
Oh, it's a good question. I don't think she is, though. But yeah, it's a good point. Just to have her lay down with heavy blankets on top of her to hide what's actually going on. Although being pregnant in this one would be helpful to her.
That's true. It would. Can't do the X-Files thing where they just give her increasingly bigger coats.
Did Ellsworth do the right thing in that he comes in the door and immediately leaves, or the wrong thing in that he did not check on her before running out to get the doctor?
I thought the exact same thing. I was like, I don't know, because I feel like you might be losing valuable seconds if you go to check on her and not get the doctor. Right. But, I guess there's nothing to be said was wrong in doing that.
No.
Unless she was like choking on something.
Bold choice, though. I don't think I would. If I came in, opened the door, and Amy was just like on the floor with a puddle of blood, I wouldn't be like, I have to go get somebody. I think I would run over. I know they're newlyweds and stuff like that, but I still think that that's something you might check on first. Like, what if she's just falling asleep on the floor?
Yeah, as you do when you're pregnant.
They all have lower back pain, just like George Hearst does. But there's not much else to say about the Alma storyline. It's just started getting going. Who else is there? Is there anybody else? No, it's just Dan and Johnny fight the Cornish. Hearst does his thing.
Oh, what about what's his name? The guy who was there when the kid got run over. The guy who tarred. Oh, Sam Fields.
Yeah, the racist Steve the racist. Yeah.
Talking to his buddy about if you become sheriff, will you protect me if I take over Hofstadler's thing? And he comes back and tries to kill me. Because I did really like. I did really like the follow up on the shit that he was slinging in the last season, where he's like, my entire family has been fucked for the entire history of our existence, and that stops now.
No, Steve is actually. I remember just virulently hating Steve, and I think Steve is like intentionally hateable, but he's a really well drawn character. I think he's like his motivations are entirely consistent, and he is. I think the performance is great from Michael Haney. I think the name of that actor is.
He's good.
He's got some really good lines, and I that's kind of a little throwaway vignette scene. It's more like Milch commenting on politics. I like the ending line from Tom there, which is like, why run for office and 10 bar at the same time when you could just 10 bar and have your friends come and punch you in the face and accomplish the same thing? So that's pretty funny. But I think it's kind of a vignette scene to get all that stuff across and to establish that Hostetler and the general have not returned yet, but it doesn't necessarily need to be there at the same time.
Do they eventually come back? Because that did very much feel like a Eddie situation.
No,
where
they
it's
do.
They do. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking, again, this show is just like, I've never seen a show that can just stop having characters on it the way that this one does.
If they were gone, I think you would have had Steve, the racist, actually working in the livery. Like a scene of it would have been, he would have been like, I've taken over.
What if you won?
I won't. I'm only in it to make myself known.
Say you're fucking elected, Harry. Am I entitled to the fucking livery abandoned by the nigger Hostetler leaving its stock to starve?
Well, I know you've took up its care.
And do you, as sheriff, hold my fucking labor speaks for me, my diligent fucking efforts the last 6 fucking weeks?
I'd hold with the law, Steve. Whatever statute applied.
Well, oughtn't the statute have to do with justice? And not just to bait back a fled fucking nigger looking to steal what a white man's worked for?
Well, Hostetler ain't come back. Why think he ever will?
Because it's my family luck over centuries to get repeatedly fucked up the ass. And here, in this fucking camp, is where the chain gets fucking broken. And I'm asking if you, as sheriff, will stand with me.
I've been thinking about that a little bit. In reference to movie franchises now, and how the big movie franchises just seem to accumulate characters that they won't let go of.
Yeah.
And it's so strange because, like, if you think back to like any James Bond movie or the old Batman movies or whatever, the only person who remains in the cast basically is Batman or James Bond, and it kind of, and some of the peripheral people. But it's not like after Batman Returns, in Batman Forever, Catwoman is also there, and then in Batman and Robin, Catwoman, Two-Face, and the Riddler are also. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But they all these giant things. It's just like the Fast and Furious movies have like 25 people in the principal cast now that all get their own car and shit. It's it's very strange.
It's too valuable to get rid of them. Right, you need to keep them around.
They're bringing back people who have died, and it's just, I don't know. It's very
CGI can do that nowadays.
Yeah,
Deadwood doesn't really have a problem with getting rid of some of the characters. We're also functioning with a little bit of knowledge in that this is the final season, right? So there's a kind of a lack of concern. At least on my part.
I can't remember. I think I asked this previously. Do they know they're getting canceled at this point?
They don't.
No. They don't. Do they not find out until the season's over?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So the season was made with the intention of potentially having another one come through.
Gotcha.
So I guess that's it. Anything else to talk about in this one? I'll put all the quotes in and everything like that, all the clips and stuff like that. But it was my general takeaway is that I don't think this was the strongest episode. It felt a little bit like the redundancy that we've talked about is kind of the main thing that I noticed from it. But at the same time, and there's going to be a storyline in this season that if you had a problem with the Isern housing thing, like this is going to top it. So like that has not started yet, and so season 3 has a little bit of ups and downs. But I just again to say it over, like the Hearst and the town stuff to me is incredible, really, and it's like what carries the season through some of the low points that it might have. But any episodes that just have Swearingen talking to Hearst about something, or Hearst sort of doing that Walcott devil whispers in the ear of people to get them to reveal themselves, that's always an A+ for me, and I always enjoy those scenes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to more of that as well. I do wish that at the beginning of the episode, when you asked me how I was doing, I had said I'm composing my thoughts, tropes, and gambits for the talk between us that's yet to come. Because
that's a fitting one.
Appropriate.
That's a that scene has a weird camera pause on Dan while Swearingen drinks from the whiskey bottle. It just felt like it was a weird editing choice, but they did it. And Al can obviously hold his liquor when he has his talk with Hearst. He just finishes off the bottle and walks out of there. So that's it. Do you have any final thoughts, or are we done?
I think we're done.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/thepensky File is the best way to do it. Support us and support Deadwood coverage around the globe. And otherwise, you support the other podcasts that we have. There's a whole bunch of them. There's a Star Trek one. There's a horror show with Clay and Amanda. There's a Batman the Animated Series one with Clay and Sean. Me and Clay do this one. We do the Star Trek one. We have a Discord. All these stuff. There's all the stuff in the links of the podcast. You can check out the little show notes thing and follow the links. And support the show at patreon.com/thepensky File. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
On Patreon, Amanda and I are going through the infamous Video Nasties list. In July, we have done Mario Bava's Bay of Blood. In August, we'll be doing Toby Hooper's The Fun House. And so check that out. And I have a comic book on the shelves. Batman White Knight presents Generation Joker #3. And #4 should be out in August. And #5 has comes out in September and has a cover that I drew, which is my first cover I've drawn for DC Comics. So that's pretty fun.
Very exciting. Excellent. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll be back next week with I Am Not the Fine Man You Take Me For, which will continue our coverage of Deadwood's 3rd season. So, thanks very much for listening. Leave the demons to God and trust the pain to me. See you later.
Voters of the camp, do you see come before you some swollen and dissolute stranger? Do not mistake. It is I, E.B. Farnham.
Not back, E.B.
Beaten past recognition by a candidate for another office.
Lie the fuck back. And listen. I need your truthful reply. Lie, I will know it. And death will be no respite.
I told Hearst nothing of Bullock and the widow.
I will profane your fucking remains, E.B.
Not my remains, Al.
Gabriel's trumpet will produce you from the ass of a pig.
He told me not to tell him, and I didn't.
I believe you.
My pain is such that gives me no solace.
Well, try not to blame Bullock for presuming it was you, considering your fucking history. Anyways, tonight's speeches are fucking canceled. Nurse your fucking wounds.
Thank you.
I do not mean here.
All right, let me collect myself.